I'm super stoked to have you in here.
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
Here in a sec, I'll have you introduce yourself and everything else. But one of the things that intrigued me to you is being a young entrepreneur, and me being an old fella now. I feel like, it's good to see people with drive, young people with drive, especially in this day and age. So I love seeing that. Introduce yourself, man.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on. I love stuff like this. Usually I'm the one asking the question. So
I know. I let you sit in that seat, man. So I had to get this side of my face at some point too. So
awesome. I like my tattoos. Oh, yeah, your tattoos are showing.
There we go. There we go. Yeah.
So, I'm like, if I'm getting them and I'm paying money, you
gotta show them.
But what's up, guys? My name's Lukas Pakter. Just a young entrepreneur, as he said, kind of touched on it perfectly. Just starting little businesses here and there since I was a kid. Lots of failures, lots of lessons. And I guess the thing that got me here was I figured let's make some content and document the journey, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there. It's a very lonely and isolating endeavor, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself. Your family might not understand, your friends. People are always criticizing you. And, I was in college and I had an amazing group of friends. I had a very big network, but I also felt very isolated and lonely. Mm-hmm. So I said, there's all these successful entrepreneurs that make personal brands and they write books and there's movies made about them after they're successful. Mm-hmm. But there's very few people actually documenting the journey, the ups and downs, the wins and the losses. So that was my whole goal with my content. It was very raw, short form content on TikTok. And I didn't really have any expectation going into it whatsoever, other than that, like maybe, when I am successful one day, when the business is doing well, then someone will care to watch a video,
Yep.
But it kind of happened the other way around.
Yeah, I do have to admit it's extremely refreshing. I've looked at a lot of your stuff, and I love the aspect that you've taken is the journey. There's a couple things that I'll get into in a little bit that stood out to me as well that, happen as a small business owner that you have to go through, because when you look at social media these days, it's all, it's all the good stuff, right? It's all the, I've accomplished this, I've done this, that, and the other. And to your point, they never document the journey. They just go, look where I am now. And 9 times out of 10, some of it's not even true, or they didn't even do what they said that they did.
A lot of that these days.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a couple times that I have seen, on even Instagram, where you have said, I've got a shipment coming in. I've got a credit card bill due. I've had to drain my personal account to pay for my business debt. Those are things that people as entrepreneurs go through every day. You don't see that shit on the outside. You've got to keep that, that straight face. Everything's great, to the outer world. But I love the fact that you're going into kind of like behind the curtain, right? Mm-hmm. The guy in the Wizard of Oz that's behind the curtain. You have to see that, because people do think everything's rosy, and it's not. I wouldn't trade it for the world. However, there's a lot of things that people just don't see. So with that said, you having to go into your personal account to pay bills. Why would you do something like that? Is it because you really believe in your process and your product?
It's a good question. And, I actually, because of the content side of things, I always like to think of every big important decision as like a part of the story, like one page, So when that situation arose, we, for everyone watching, I own a clothing brand. So we had to prepare for Chinese New Year. They don't make stuff for a whole month almost. And I really got screwed last year with that. I didn't even know that was a thing because it was my first year. And so this year ordered a ton of gear ahead of time, double as much as we normally would. A clothing business is all based on cash flow, right? And it's hard because you have to sell it in order to order more, and it's, scalability. And so ordered way too much. That way we weren't stuck with nothing for a couple of weeks, which is what happened last year. That's why, that's not good, having no revenue for a whole month. But didn't have enough to pay off the credit cards, so I had to transfer everything in my personal bank account over to my business one to pay it off. But I didn't look at it as like stressful or anything. To have full transparency, we had a big product that just released yesterday, and I I had about as sure as a feeling as you could get that was going to do really well. So I knew like, okay, I'm just kind of fronting the money. And then once this product releases, like I'll make it back. And then that's what happened. So we're very fortunate for that. But it was like throwing my money on red. It's just like, you know, I had heard from a friend that the table leans to the right or something like that. You know what I mean? So
no, it makes
but I look at it
sense.
as part of the story, and I think it's fun to like be transparent and talk about that stuff.
Yeah. But even though, you know, even in doing that, you're taking something that's kind of like your protection, right? Your safeguard.
Yeah.
When you're taking that out of your personal, you know, you're not reaching in couches yet, pulling out change and stuff. But when you do that, though, there still is that feeling of, I know that this is going to work out, you know, but there's still that mindset sometimes of, oh shit, this better work out. You know what I mean? Because to your point, you threw it all on red, you know, so it sounds like it's worked out well and stuff.
It did. The product, I mean, I had been talking about this product for a really long time and people were really excited for it. So when it came out, like the first day, it was, you know, really successful launch, and I haven't put the money back into my account yet, but once the funds settle and everything, I'll be good. But there is a little bit of risk there. Like for whatever reason, if, I don't know, if I didn't, if the shipping was done incorrectly, or maybe let's say, the product, like the manufacturer messed up and like, we were definitely playing it really close. And you know, it was pretty risky because we had a hard launch date. The shipment was taking much longer than expected to arrive from China. That's kind of why we're in the process of switching over to Mexico, which is a whole nother issue on top of things. But I had a pretty good feeling it was gonna, you know, pay off, and it did, thankfully. But sometimes it doesn't, and you just kind of have to be. I think as an entrepreneur, every decision you make is a risk. It's not like your boss is telling you to do something, and if it doesn't work, like he can't really get mad at you because he told you to do it. As long as you like fulfill your duty, you know, you're somewhat protected, I guess. You know, there always are external factors, but as an entrepreneur, like you never really wake up with like any sort of assurance aside from your own experience and the confidence that you built up. It feels like, to me at least. I don't know if you have a different perspective on that.
No, it's true. You know, and especially if you have, you know, I'd love to know, how big is your company right now? Do you have any employees? Is it just you?
We have a couple employees. So I started with my cousin in college. That was coming up on 2 years now is when the idea phase started. Didn't launch until about a year and a half ago. So not last fall, but the fall before. But yeah, my cousin and I were co-founders. We have 2 employees that are like main guys. And then the beautiful thing about, you know, the internet today and e-commerce brands is you can always find people that are really good at one thing and they work for a ton of different companies. So like, you know, I was packing orders out of my garage, my apartment, and then graduated to my cousin's garage for probably the first 9 months of the business.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we moved into a fulfillment center. They take a pretty hefty cost off the top, but they handle all the work for us. So where they do all the customer service, they're really good at it. They do all the shipping, all the exchanges, canceled orders, everything, all the returns.
Wow.
So that takes a lot of workload off so I can focus on the big things. And then we also have like lots of contracted employees. So email guy, ads team, our designers are, you know, originally I designed everything. I don't even do that anymore because I was never that good at it. So I'm happy that I can hand that responsibility off. But they're a team that does designs for a lot of different brands, and you kind of just instruct them on what you're looking for and
let them run with it.
Yeah, even athletes, like our salespeople, like our athletes or our affiliates or our salesmen essentially. And they work for us, but they, you know, they might be in college, or like they might be an influencer themselves. They make a ton of money off off TikTok or whatever. We're just one revenue stream for them. So there's probably like, I don't know, maybe like 80 people that potentially work for the business, but all in little ways. Like, you know,
it takes a team, you know, and at the end of the day, as a business owner, in having like true employees, that's when kind of the weight's on you at the end of the day, because every decision you make is someone else's livelihood. And that's where sometimes it can be tough. You know, we've got a a sizable, what I call machine. And there's certain projects that we do that feed the machine, and then there's passion projects, and then there's really revenue generating projects, and it's kind of in these different buckets, right? You got to keep the machine going at all times because so many people depend on you. And those are the things that I think a lot of people don't think of at night when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like, oh shit, I've got this, and this that's got to pan out because I've got all these people depending on me, and again, it always looks rosy to the outside. Oh, you get to travel. Oh, you get to do this. Oh, you get to do that.
You make a lot of money, right? There's a lot of people that see how much money entrepreneurs can get paid the least. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no.
And the most. But these days on the internet, you see a ton of people that are really upset that some people make certain amounts of money. And in my head, I'm thinking like, bro, this person probably had the most sleepless nights or the most amount of stress where their hair is just falling out everywhere. And they deserve it.
Totally. And at the end of the day, they're the person taking the risk. Mm-hmm. And it's anywhere from small entrepreneurs to large company owners, right? Mm-hmm. Those people are creating jobs, and those people are creating wealth for others as well. They should be rewarded, because at the end of the day, we want to keep a lot of that stuff here versus farming it out, right? So it's kind of funny. I believe it was like 2008, 2009. Yeah, Michael Dell was taxed an exorbitant amount. So he said, fine. He took most of his customer support overseas. He's like, fine, I won't pay people here. I'll take it overseas. Well, those are jobs that we could have kept here in the U.S., but because of a tax base, because they punished him for earning income and hiring employees, we lost all of that. So
and the money doesn't even really go anywhere anyway.
Exactly.
Like, you don't know where that tax money goes. That's the thing. At least if you own a business, that it's going into someone's pocket, right?
I know. And that's, we can go down a whole nother political realm that I can talk for days on. But, I think our money needs to stay here.
Sure.
And it needs to work with our country and make our country better, But with that said, why did you get into the industry, and the clothing industry? What was it? What sparked it?
That's a good question. And I've had a lot of people. The clothing industry is a business that has so few barriers to entry. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had probably a dozen friends growing up. Oh, I'm starting a clothing brand, right? Everyone sees my content, like my followers. Oh, I'm going to start a clothing brand too. It's really easy to start. Yeah. You find blanks, you make a design, you put it on the shirt, right? Mm-hmm. I think it might be one of the easiest businesses to start.
Really?
But it also might be one of the hardest ones to succeed in because there's so many competitors. Once again, it's all cash flow based. Like a tech company, you can build the product once and sell it 1 million times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And with a media empire, right? You make the video once, as long as it's good, it can be watched as many times as you want. But clothes, like you make it once and you sell it once, right? And you have to wait to get that money to order more unless you're just, maxing out credit cards, which I've definitely had experience with, and it's stressful. But the reason for it was, I think, especially, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of young entrepreneurs these days that aren't really building anything. Mm-hmm. There's a lot, I don't know if you've seen this yourself, but there's a lot of communities and info products and courses, and so many. I know a lot of kids my age that are in like this, 21 to 25 area. They make $100,000, $200,000. One guy makes $600,000 a month.
It's crazy.
But it's all on like these info products, right? I'll teach you how to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of people out there like that. So number one, I was like, I actually want to start a real business that I can scale, that has employees, that is pretty much an asset, right? Something that can be considered an asset. The reason I picked clothing is because I had this, number one, fitness is super important to me. I think it might be the best outlet for self-improvement if you have no idea where to start. Like, I think, self-improvement and growth right now is a trend. Everyone's into it. It's awesome. I love seeing this all over social media, and young guys, young girls. In fitness, if you don't know how to start getting your life on track, is the first thing you can do, right? Mm-hmm. There's obviously some people have genetic gifts. Some people are taller, shorter. Some people have the resources to go to nicer facilities, to hire trainers, but anyone can go on a run and do push-ups, or most people, if your body's able. Yeah. Most people can do push-ups, right? So it's such an easy way to get on this, to introduce yourself to the world of self-improvement. And I was starting to build this big, young audience of guys, 18 to 26, that were into self-improvement and development. Mm-hmm. And I thought, damn, what a better way to sell to this audience than like a fitness athletic clothing brand, right? So what I'm trying to build right now, it's a much more long-term vision. A lot of people are like, oh, you sell clothes. But I'm trying to build, and I don't want to base it off somebody else's story, but like what Lululemon did for the Boss Girl. I don't know if you ever read his book.
No, I haven't.
Little Black Stretchy Pants.
Okay.
Amazing book. Chip Wilson wrote it. You know, he's not a part of Lulu anymore, but he built Lulu on this idea of like the boss female, right? This girl, all these women, like the graduation rate of women is now exceeding men in the early 2000s. They're starting to make money. They're starting to be very solo, you could say. And so he's like, I'm going to build a brand that focuses on them. For me, that was what I wanted to do. So, you know, I think over the next couple of years, as my audience and these young guys, you know, continue to develop, they're more than likely going to be higher earners because they're focused on getting better this early. And then, you know, we want to have like a really premium, high quality, trendy, athletic clothing brand to cater to that.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You know, it's kind of funny. When I was young, we just didn't have that. You know what I mean? And when I say that, we did not have people that were really forward in health and wellness. We just didn't. You either played sports or you didn't, right? That was about as far as it went. And every once in a while you had a couple guys here and there that worked out a little bit more, but it was never like it is today. And I love it, you know. Our business, even though we build homes and things like that, we base a lot of our homes and our builds and our designs and how they're produced and built around health and wellness. And we started doing it years ago, before green building was considered cool. Yeah. And so just by way of products that are used in homes, how they're used, things like that. And so it's something we lean to hard and heavy. You know, like we put steam saunas in all of our master bedroom showers.
I got to hit you up.
It's just,
I'm ready to get one.
It's a given. Yeah.
Awesome. I need
We
that.
do that. Infrared saunas as well, because we do a lot of 3-story homes and attic areas and stuff. And it's little things. Not only, you know, you've got to find little niches in things that when people walk in the house, they go, oh, cool, it's got this, right? Because you always want to stay one step ahead of your competitor. But it's also something that we believe in. And it's kind of funny. Given the opportunity to move into here, you know, our office is here as well. There's no excuse. You know what I mean? You got to walk up those stairs and you walk through the gym and you see the gym and there's even the girls in there. There's no excuse. You got to get in there.
Kind of perfect.
I know.
You can come a little early or you can stay a little late, but you're walking through it every time. You're getting that extra, you know, everyone should be internally motivated, but you are getting that external motivation.
Yeah.
I think a lot of motivation doesn't need to come from your heart itself. It's just figuring out whatever way to get you in the gym.
Exactly.
Right? So I think that's really cool of you guys.
And you know, you always feel better about it, you know. Yeah. I've always thought it's very important to take care of employees. And that was one of the things that was one of the reasons why we did it. You know, even as a team building event every Wednesday, minus this Wednesday because I'll be out of town, you know, we do the 4:30 yoga stretching, you know, and everybody's in there and everybody feels phenomenal when they leave, you know, but it's just something that we do together as a team that I feel is important because team members and teamwork is important to a work environment, you know. So in starting a business as a younger entrepreneur, what are probably 2 or 3 things or mistakes that you made that you just had no clue of? You know, did you have a mentor when you started? You know, did you have someone to bounce things off of, or are you just from the school of hard knocks type deal?
Well, I have a lot of smart people in my life, very different fields though. Like my dad is a genius. He's, you know, Stanford and Johns Hopkins, but doctor.
Yeah.
Very different than entrepreneur. He actually was
very different, smart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I did have like kind of a mentor figure, but he was in commercial real estate, so it didn't really apply to business. But for mindset type of stuff, like you need to work harder type vibe, that was important. I think much of it was self-learned. The internet's great because there's now having somewhat of a platform. I feel like every question I have, I can hit someone up and find someone. And more importantly, like people. Like if I need help with something, if I need help with some issue, I don't have to try and do it myself, or risk hiring someone who's not capable, I can hit up a friend and be like, hey, you know, you kind of mentioned that you had this problem with your SEO. Like, can you refer me to someone, right? So that's really awesome. But in terms of mistakes, I think patience was a big one, right? Everyone thinks it's going to happen faster than it's going to happen. And even with like an example I could give is being pretty new to the clothing industry, I was trying to set up our line of winter products like 2 months before, you know, the winter holidays, right? And I thought that was enough time. In reality,
You would think, right?
yeah, most
Right.
companies are like the really successful ones, like for Lulu, for example, right? Or Nike, they already know what they're going to make in 2026, right? So they're way ahead of schedule. And yeah, I just, you know, I told my manufacturer, normally it takes like a month to produce most gear. I told her I need it in 3 weeks. It shows up terrible, right? There's all these problems with it. You know, we didn't even have time to like make sure the samples were good. So I just told her, send me a picture. It looked good. Oh, okay, bet let's run it. Send her the 20, I think it was like 20K to, you know, order a round of like a really important product that was supposed to release on Black Friday, right? So I said, hey, I need this by Black Friday, 3 weeks away. And she's like, I said, can you do this? She goes, yeah. I'm like, okay, great. Send her the money. It shows up and it's terrible. And I got really mad at her for that at first, but it's my fault.
Yeah.
100%. It's my fault. Should have been, you know, figured out months ahead of schedule. And that same product, you know, that was the one we just released like a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, 3 months later now almost. That's how long I should have given myself.
Wow.
But because I rushed it and I wasn't patient and I didn't make sure everything was set and, you know, looked perfect.
Had to
Everything
test
was in
product,
order. Yeah,
everything.
hadn't tested anything, hadn't gotten customer feedback. Because of that, I lost, you know, 3 months worth of time. Maybe had I been patient, I could have gotten it out by Christmas instead of rushing it. But I also lost 20K. And that was a hard hit to a startup. And I lost a bit of hype. But I actually looked at it as a good thing because I made a couple pieces of content on it. I hit up our top customers. I was like, hey, you know, we told you that this product was going to arrive on the 28th or whatever it was. And it sucks. I'm not even going to lie. I just sent out an email saying it sucks and I'm not going to sell this.
Well, and sometimes transparency is the best, right? Because how many people will candy coat that shit and just make it look like, oh, this is the best thing ever and still do it. And then your reputation is going to suffer even more.
Yeah.
So transparency and honesty goes a lot of times, and vulnerability even further than you would think, you know. Hate that you had to go through that, but I'm glad that you went through that early in your career, right? You know, and I think part of that, it's, you know, and I keep, at some point I'm going to tell you the price of bread when I was your age or something like that, I feel like. However, you know, we just didn't have some of the platforms and things like that when we started. And, you know, I really started with the School of Hard Knocks, you know.
I bet.
Trial and error, right? You know, and everything was books back then and stuff like that. Now I'm really starting to show my age. But I'm glad that you experienced that young, you know, and early in your career so that you could just accelerate from there, you know. So that's awesome.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I don't look at it as like a bad thing. I try to have a positive attitude. Like, damn, thank God I figured that out right now, because that's never going to happen again. And yeah, you know, that's all part of it. Like, there's no, like, I think this is one thing that I learned really quickly that I think a lot of people need to hear is, I think a lot of people who have no idea what entrepreneurship is, or they see people with businesses or brands, and they think that person always knows the answer. You know, you look at like a guy like yourself, right? Veteran, or even, you know, a guy like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, whoever, you think like this person knows everything, right? Phil Knight is a great example. Like, you look at a guy like the founder of Nike and you're like, bro, this guy just knows exactly what he's doing all the time. But then you read his book, Shoe Dog. Have you ever read that one?
No.
It was probably the first book I read on entrepreneurship. And, you know, you're seeing how he's like lying to his manufacturers about being a real company, right? Just so he can get them to ship him stuff, because it was all bootstrapped and he had no idea what he was doing. And then he's selling shoes out of his car at high school track meets and just screwing up left and right. And you're reading this story, or I'm reading the story, and I'm thinking like, wow, like this is a guy who I would think had everything figured out since day one. In reality, like none of this is that impressive or whatever, but somehow he created this monster of a business, right? This mountain. So I think you need to like go into business and entrepreneurship knowing that there's no way to avoid failure. Like, it's going to happen. You just have to fail quickly.
Yep. You know, I've got superintendents that have inspections with the city and stuff on a regular basis. And a lot of times, and I've told this story before, I will walk a house with them and look, and I see the things that are wrong, and I know what they're going to get popped on. But instead of me pointing them out and telling them how to fix them, I let them fail. And the reason is because they will remember that always. If I point it out and go, man, you need to put some foam around this, or you need to do this, that, or the other, and this is the reason why, they'll do it, but they'll forget it, right? But if they have to come back with a failed certificate the next day going, dude, I failed on these 5 things. And I go, I know.
Wow.
You know, and I've had people go, why didn't you tell me? And my answer is because you would never remember.
Wait, that's great. That's awesome. I'm glad you said that.
It's phenomenal.
That's one thing that I need to get better at, you know, and I'm trying to deal with right now, delegating.
The thing is understand that you can pick those up from your experience. Let someone fail. Now, it's not, as long as it's not catastrophic, right? If it costs me a day or two, whatever, right? I know that made enough of an impression on them that it'll never happen again. You know, and that's going to be one of the first things they look at the next time they go for that similar inspection all the time. They will never forget it. But it's little goofy things like that, right? The other thing that you brought up earlier that I think is extremely important is you said you had a crowd growing up that you hung out with. Do you see as an entrepreneur that your crowd has changed?
Yeah, 100%. And this is interesting because I think like this idea of day ones to people is very warped. You know, I think a lot of people's close connections and friendships, even family, they're there because of like walls that were kind of put up, just circumstance, you know, like your friends in high school, you're probably friends with them because they were on your sports team or they were in the same class as you, something out of your control. But then as you grow up and you get older and you start to really find what you're passionate about and you start to identify your values and, you know, what's most important to you, your friends definitely change. And if you hold on to the wrong people, they're just going to drag you down. And I heard this great quote the other day. I've even talked about it on my podcast a few times, but someone said, you got to look at your life like a rocket ship, right? You know how it starts this big contraption, and then as you get to higher altitudes, you know, bigger and bigger pieces just start falling off. And the piece that actually makes it into space is just this little tiny pod. Right, it's like 1 or 2% the size of the entire rocket when it took off, and it's just like the metaphor is that, you know, some people aren't like built to last at certain altitudes, right? And so you're just naturally going to lose people just based on odds. Like, not everyone you grew up with is going to make it if you're trying to always grow and get better. And, you know, it's hard cutting people off and stuff, especially if it's like close people, like day one friends, family, whatever. But if someone's not good for you, then you got to do it.
Well, and that's the thing. At the end of the day, everybody should be, I say everybody, those that you have in your close circle should be the ones that are supporting you, being your biggest cheerleader, you know, honoring those accomplishments that you make. There's nothing that I love more than seeing my friends succeed. I love that, you know.
That's great.
It's whether I had a hand in it or not, I love that because there's nothing better than succeeding, you know, and by celebrating those things, it's going to generate more success, you know. I always just, you know, everybody says it. I never like being the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I love learning. You know, it doesn't mean that I have to use it in what I necessarily do or something like that, but I want to learn different views, different stances that people have, different ways that they may do something. Hey, man, how do you handle an HR difficulty or this, that, and the other? You can take what you want and leave the rest, but it's always good to have perception of outside eyes looking in on anything. Because a lot of times what I have found, once you put ego aside and everything, you're going to learn something, right? You can take a little bit of a piece of something and build from that. But you can't do that, you know, being an older dude, we came from an ego-driven, you know, generation. You know, I can do it better than you can and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until I got older that I went, wait, these are my weaknesses. I know how to do them. I don't like doing them, but it's a weakness. I need to look to those who excel at that. And that took a long time for me, you know, and it sounds like that's something that you've learned at a younger age, which will only help you in the future.
Well, I fully agree, by the way. I think that's great too, that you've been able to like shift away from that, not know it all, but like,
Yeah.
I think it's against human nature to admit that you have weakness, right? Because, in the past, just in terms of evolution, like you always needed to act like you were confident of you do need to always act confident in your decisions, but there was not much thought behind people back then. It was just seeming strong and leader, right? And I fully agree, because even like literally right before this call, I was on the phone with this guy for an hour, just out of nowhere, really cool connection. Friend of mine who kind of works with me was like, yo, you got to talk to this guy. And I just got slapped in the face, honestly. He was pretty much telling me, you're about to make a huge mistake. And I'll explain it to you. Essentially, like, I started making content a year and a half ago. Content blew up, fed my business a lot, not only in terms of sales directly from my views and my followers, but my content is what allowed me to make all the connections that help the business grow. Big athletes, every single person that works for the business, it started by them hitting me up saying, yo, I like what you're building. Like, let me get involved. Almost every single part of the business's success, at least on my end, like my partner's done a lot too, but on my end has come from my socials. And recently I've started to post less and less because I feel like I'm getting, dragged away by the business, and I need to become less of an influencer and more of a businessman entrepreneur. And I'm on the phone with this guy, and he said, I've seen people make this mistake over and over and over. You're about to bite the hand that feeds you. You need to keep spamming content. You need to keep growing your socials. And he's like, I know you think that like what you're doing is right, but like, trust me, I've seen this a lot. You do not want to stop posting right now. And I just sat there and listened to him for like 20, 25 minutes while he's berating me. I was like, damn, this guy's 100% right.
Yeah.
And that was, I think a lot of people, like, I will say, like, a year ago, I would not have been mature enough, to be receptive to that, right? I would have been like, who the fuck does this guy think he is, bro? Like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I've gotten here so far. Yeah. But no, that was exactly what I needed to hear. And it was really helpful. So I try and surround myself with people that can, I think most people don't want to be around others who will challenge them, right? And I think that's one of the most important things for growth, is finding the people that are going to be really honest with you and not say what you want to say and not agree with you when you're wrong, Yeah,
it's very true. Those people that actually care about you, your well-being and your success, will give you what you need, not what you want.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. And those are the people you want to be with.
Yeah.
I want to be around those people that are like, you're fucking up. You need to do this, not that. To your point, this is what got you here, not this. Those are people that'll be honest with you, that will keep you in line, right? And it's, as an individual, a lot of times we just have blinders on, right? And we just run through life. That's why I love speaking and talking to other people and having a close-knit group of friends that will challenge me, because, again, not purposeful, right? Until something's pointed out, individuals typically don't know that they're doing something, right? So if you change course and you're going the route of leaning into your business, which makes sense, right? But you forget about what got you there, you need that person to just kind of smack you back in line.
100%.
Not because they're being an asshole, but because they see what you can become and what you can do and how you got there. Those are important people to have in your life,
Absolutely. I'm curious, were there any big revelations you've had in the past couple of years where it was just like something you held to be true your entire career as an entrepreneur, or maybe just as a person in terms of relationships, that recently it was just like, wow, I've been doing this wrong the entire time?
Well,
maybe it was from a big failure, or maybe it was just somebody else gave you the advice.
Yeah, usually it's kind of funny. They say if you are a successful developer, you will have filed bankruptcy before. And that was one of the most devastating things in my life. About 2010, I had to file bankruptcy, was dealing with several investors. I front-ended a lot of cash that I didn't necessarily have, and got caught with like $6 million in real estate, that was in production or starting production, because it normally worked at, I had the small group of investors. I would find projects. I would start the engineering. I would start the architecture. And then I'd go, all right, guys, it's time to ante up. We got all this funds out, blah, blah, blah. And the market was tanking, and they all ran and left me, what was that back then, late 20s, early 30s, holding the bag on everything. And I thought the world had come to an end. But I learned several things from that. I knew not all money's good money. Not all partners are good partners. And to paper everything you do. So I don't care what it is, right? Contracts are not made for when times are good. They're made for when times are bad. And if someone's uncomfortable papering something with you, you got to look a little bit further, right? Most of the people, all of the people I deal with, we have contracts with everything. You have to. And again, it's not for when times are good, it's for when times are bad. But plus, you may have understood something differently than I did, right? So to, basically line it out on a chalkboard and put it on a piece of paper, that everything is the way that it should be and agreed upon as it's written, right? So those are some of the things, when I was young, everything was a handshake deal. Austin's very much a good old boy town and has been for forever. I've been here since I was 12 years old, and that's how you did business. But you can't do that anymore, and that's sad. I would love to be able to get back to that point. But in the same sense, those boundaries have been pushed so far that it's almost like no going back. Now, are there friends of mine and investors that I still can do that with? Absolutely. But that's long-term relationships, right? But that, if I had to say anything, not all money is good money. Yeah. Because you can get an investor that can come in and everything seems rosy, and then they become a control freak, or they become this, or they become that. And you're like, this is not where this relationship started. And especially if you didn't paper it, that's where you can get yourself in a world of hurt. And a lot of times, more than anything, even over greed, money, power, it's typically feelings that get in the way, right? You feel wronged, or they feel wronged, which at the end of the day will cause retaliatory, or, someone's going to come back at you with something. And then it's typically all emotional. If you put everything on paper, there's no emotion at that point. I've done well to be able to separate business and personal. I don't know what it is. My brain's just funky like that. I can flip the switch either way. But, there has been times I had an ex-partner about 5 years ago that was kind of a mentor to me, and I got stabbed in the back. And we were very close. And that was something that my mindset from there on out was, I will never have a partner again. And I've kind of held true to that, right? I can have a partner in a project that has a start and a finish, but not a project in my business, or not a partner in my business. That's something that I can't do. But my business is a little bit easier to do that with, because we have projects that you can drop in and out of versus the operating side of the business. I would think it'd be a little more difficult on your side, because that business is the entire project, if you would.
Totally. And by the way, I really appreciate you saying that, because that's something that I'm dealing with right now, like literally this moment. I've been screwed over by a best friend before. And I think, kind of on another side note, like one of the most intimidating things to me about entrepreneurship since day one was like a lack of an understanding of the legal side of this business, right? Of this industry, right? When you're a kid, like, they don't teach you how to do contracts in school. They don't teach you how to not get screwed over by people. I feel like it's something that has to happen to you. Like, there's no way to prevent it from happening until it happens. Hopefully you learn really early. I learned it like freshman year of college, got screwed over by my best friend. And I was like, damn, that's not going to happen again. And even right now, I'm working as like a potential advisor with this brand, trying to help out as much as I can. And I got sent a contract this morning that wasn't like, it was like pretty loose, it's just like, there's no obligations in it. There's no expectations. There was no non-disclosure. Like, it just felt like something, I almost felt like it was a test. Like the person who sent it was like, does this kid know what he's doing, right? Does he know what he's doing? And if I would have signed that, it would have been like my death warrant. Like, I deserved to get screwed over at that point. So I'm still trying to deal with that today. And there's still a lot of legal things that come up where I'm like, damn, like I have no idea what to do. And they just, once again, they just don't teach you that in school. And if you're lucky, you have maybe a father or an uncle or a family friend that's a lawyer or something that can help you out. But a lot of times, like, you kind of just have to learn by getting screwed over.
Yeah.
But in my business, in terms of partners, I think having partners is great. Once again, though, yeah, making sure everything is understood and written down since the beginning. You know, I've been in businesses where, you know, with friends, even with a family member, we're starting something, and then we didn't really like fully agree upon like how much of the business was whose, right?
Yeah.
And then it gets to the day when you do need to write it down, and everyone's like thrown off guard, like, wait, I thought it was this, I thought it was this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who thought what, like you're stuck having to figure it out now. So
Exactly.
that being said, though, I think, at least in my business, I think a partner is great for a couple things. Obviously shared risk, but also on days when I'm necessarily like not feeling the most motivated or driven, it's not just my future that's at risk, right? Like you have a partner that's going to be on your ass. Like, yo, when is this going to get done, dude? Like, yo, I thought you said the lawyers were working on this, or I thought you said like this shipment was supposed to arrive. Like, I haven't heard word that it's here yet, you know? So you have another person.
Accountability.
Yeah, it's external motivation, you know, in addition to your internal motivation.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, having a partner's tough. Like, like I said, my cousin, who's been like, you know, really close with me, one of my good friends, I'd consider him since we were born, very close in age. He's a year younger. We fight all the time, and we have arguments, and he's like, I really think we should do this. And I'm like, I really think we should do this. And sometimes I actually forget that that's a really good thing, that we can argue like that. And we are bounded by blood, and we're so close to the point where, like, if there ever was a massive fight or something, like, there is no option. Like, we have to figure it out. You know what I mean? So I think that's...
You're going to see each other at the family reunion.
Yeah, exactly. and so it's tough, but, you know, I love him, and he's been an awesome partner with me. And, you know, I wouldn't want to do it with anybody else because I know I can trust him, and he knows he can trust me. So...
Yeah. And those are relationships you hold on to, you know, and you get those come very few in a lifetime, you know, and I don't mean to sound like a skeptic or anything else at all, but it's just really valuing those relationships that you'll pick up over time, and you'll find many more, you know, and you just lean into those when you find those. And to your point, you know, cutting those out of your life that don't enrich your life and that you in turn can enrich theirs, right? It's got to be a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
How can I help you? How can you help me? How can we help one another? You know, we weren't put on this earth to do life alone. We were put on this earth to be, you know, together with other individuals. And it's finding those people that have the same mindsets and things that you do as well to help each one of you perform to your peak.
Absolutely.
You know?
I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I've been trying to, like, one thing that I ask all my guests, because it's really important to me, and I try and just ask lots of like influential people in my life, is you want all your friends and family to succeed, right? Like you said at the beginning, like, it's just as awesome seeing somebody else win big as it is yourself, if that person means a lot to you, if they're in your close circle. But some people, it just feels like you cannot help them save themselves. You know what I mean? How do you go about motivating or slapping someone into shape, setting someone on the right track if they're, you know, someone that you believe in, but maybe they don't believe in themselves?
Yeah, it's tough. Right. And sometimes you can only push, support, and help for so long. You know, I've had some very, very, very dear friends of mine for several years that I've basically had to walk away from. And it was tough, you know, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the person you want to be, and especially once you get family involved. You know, I'm married. I've got 3 boys. My youngest is 19. I got a 21 and a 22-year-old.
Nice.
So they're all out of the house. They all wipe their ass. They all drive. They all can feed themselves. I'm good, right? Wife and I can travel. But what you learn is, you know, people enter your life for seasons, right? And those relationships that you walk through your entire life with, those are the ones you nurture. And if you can't, I've always felt if someone can't have an open mind enough to understand that the person that's coming to you with something that may point something out is coming to you in love, in respect, and as a true friend that wants to help and improve you, you can't do that for them, right? And there's got to be a point to where it starts taking your energy and draining it, you know?
Yeah.
So it really kind of depends. I support any and everybody that's around me, but there are some of those that just become draining. That every time you talk to them, everything's negative.
Yep.
Nothing's good. You leave them just feeling drained. I've always been, when I grew up, life was just a little bit different, right? I was in the bar industry. We always got in fights. We always drank, even in the building industry, very testosterone driven, very egomaniac. It's that industry, right? A subcontractor's not doing what they're supposed to do. You're yelling at each other. It's just an aggressive type of industry. And so it took me forever to figure out how to deal with things on a normal basis, right? And leaning into that. And it was people that were like mentors to me. I never had anybody that helped guide me through the process of building or anything else. I had to learn everything on my own, which I was fine with because, again, I remembered it, right? And that's probably why I'm so stringent on, I'm going to let you fail.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you fail on purpose. Just because that's the way I grew up too. That's how my dad was, and you are always a product of your environment. But with that said, as you get older, as I got older, I found those people around me that were just keeping me down. And I don't want to say, and I don't want it to sound like I was better than them or anything else. I just wanted more for myself, for my life, and those around me, and my kids. I want to show them what success looks like. And it looks different in everybody's eyes. Mm-hmm. But success is being happy, being around those that you love, having what you need. You can always have more, right? But at the end of the day, do you have what you need? And how can you help others? That was something that was huge. And if those values aren't had and those values feel like they're being drained from me, I can't have you in my life. And it's just because I want to be around those that I can cheer for, that I can support, and that'll do the same thing for me in turn at the end of the day.
Yeah. Are they filling your bucket or emptying your bucket? A good friend of mine said to me one time, amazing
so
dude.
True.
Met this guy I had on my podcast, like one leg Paralympian stud, and I asked him the same question. He said, you have to like look at every single person in your life and ask yourself, are they filling your bucket or emptying your bucket? I really like that. So it sounds very similar.
True.
I agree.
It's so true.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What I want to know though is, I talked about a little bit about your product. I still want you to these are the essentials that you need. These are the clothes that you need. These are the clothes that, you should lean towards. Send me a list, whatever. Happy to order them. Love supporting young entrepreneurs and everything else. But tell me about what you just released. What's this thing, man? Because
I'm glad you brought it up. This new product, my business, it's called SquidHaus. The history behind the name is like, the term squid is an insult, right? It's weak, spineless, bottom of the food chain. And then Haus or house, it's pronounced kind of both ways, is the exact opposite, right? Stud, good at everything. Someone walks in a room and you just look at them, that guy's a Haus, right? That guy has his shit figured out. That guy exudes confidence, right? So the whole brand is about like growth, right? And that originally started in the gym. Now we're moving into other lines of apparel. So like running, we got golf, fighting coming out soon. But the new product we released yesterday was like this really high quality pair of running shorts. And, it's just like something we've been working on a really long time, something that I knew we had to get right. And it's more on the expensive side, which, most of our customers are actually like, young kids, don't have a ton of money. But, it's a really high quality product. And if you want to pay for quality, it's worth it. But yeah, it's a pair of these new hybrid running shorts, essentially. Okay. But yeah, I'm really excited. Did well, first day of release. People are really happy with them, it seems. So
did you get with Matt yet? Matt Choi yet?
No.
Big runner.
I've heard the name, but I actually haven't been introduced to him yet. A few people have brought him up.
I'll introduce you to him at some point. He's in and out of town all the time and stuff like that. But yeah, I've talked to him a couple times here and there in passing and stuff, but he's big in the running game here.
That'd be great. I always want honest criticism and feedback, especially from people who would actually wear it. Like, for the release there's a lot of younger, like hybrid athlete runner influencers here in Austin that I'm good friends with now, and we all ran the marathon in it. So that was
I saw that.
I ran the half marathon.
That's okay.
They all ran the marathon. They like the shorts, but to get like a vet like him actually, and I literally would love him. I would actually rather he put him on in front of a lot of people and say, like, I don't like this part about it, you know, because then I can go and make him better. So that'd be awesome.
No, excellent. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Again, it's super. I love the fact that you're a young entrepreneur. Again, you know, just with generations, it's great to see someone with inspiration, drive, in the ability to take things from one step to another. So I really appreciate you coming in, and thank you guys as well.
Thanks for having me. Thank you guys.